Hello, and thanks for tuning into this video. My name is Zach, and I'm a lifelong reader and lover of all things science fiction, fantasy, comics, manga, personal development, and everything in between. Today, I'm sharing my thoughts and review of Sam Harris's Waking Up. This book got recommended to me through Reddit, so I was reading a subreddit article or a thread on mindfulness. I can't remember exactly where it was, whether it was like a Get Disciplined kind of subreddit or something, but anyways, the topic of mindfulness came up, and someone recommended that, their favorite book was Sam Harris's Waking Up. So, intrigued, I opened up my Libby app, found it available, and checked it out, and devoured it over a couple days. Having been a, maybe not recent interest, a fairly long-standing interest in mindfulness, going back ages to Zen Buddhism, like back in middle school, so maybe 20 years ago. I've always had an interest in kind of mindfulness and being more present, and recently kind of getting back into books and reading again through audio, reading Michael Singer's The Untethered Soul and Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. Those two in particular, I'm thinking of some other ones here and there, but those two in particular had a really strong effect on me of really resonating with me, like the philosophy that how they look at mindfulness and self. And yeah, I thought that this Sam Harris book would kind of scratch that itch, that learning more about mindfulness. So I read it and devoured it, and I thought it was very intriguing. So it's a book that's pros and cons, like every book, and setting up this review or just thoughts that I think any book is useful if you take anything away from it. So while I may not enjoyed every part of this book and found use in every single chapter, it did get me thinking. So it was time well spent. I'm glad I listened to it, and it, especially when you're on like a philosophical subject like mindfulness, anything that gets you thinking more outside the box or more about self and mindfulness and consciousness in general, I think it's a good thing. So this book really kind of comes at from a more scientific standpoint compared to The Untethered Soul and The Power of Now. So I thought that was a really interesting take on it, that Harris really kind of shows kind of why spirituality, I mean, as the subtitle of the book, spirituality is doesn't have to be denominational. So I really, having gone into this actually not knowing who Sam Harris was. So after I read this book, I kind of looked it up and realized, whoa, this guy is, he's been on all of some of my favorite podcasts, like the Rich Roll podcast and others. He's made the circuits. He's talked to all the people that I kind of follow already for general life advice. And I thought that was really cool that this book didn't exist to me, but I found it and I listened to it through the magic of Reddit. And I thought it was, again, like I said, interesting. So I like that it was more as kind of a scientific basis of what mindfulness does for your brain and how your brain kind of processes information. And it got me thinking about these concepts like mindfulness and being present and the soul and the self, maybe not the soul, but the self and your idea of self, and coming at it from a little more scientific perspective. So the early chapters kind of, lay out that the practices that, mainly I think Tibetan Buddhism and Vipassana is the main kind of philosophies that Harris talks about, but how that they have secular, so non-religious benefits. And if you take away kind of the religious aspect of all this and just focus on kind of the benefits of meditating without following, again, controversial or not, whatever could happen out there in the kind of metaphysical realm, but there are scientific benefits to meditation and being free of your thoughts. So I enjoyed that immensely, the early chapters where he kind of lays out more the argument of why these practices can be good for society, whether you attach them to a religious context or just for kind of the health benefits. So that was interesting, and learning more about kind of consciousness and using logic to really piece together what makes consciousness and thoughts really happen. And I'm also, it's like this, the self is an illusion created by the brain. So it's Dzogchen and Vipassana are kind of the philosophies. And that was kind of the good thing, but the bad thing or negative aspects of the book that I didn't resonate with as much was, okay, first of all, the later chapters, which again, after I read this, I read the reviews, and I had the common criticism that the second half of the book, or maybe the second or the last third of the book, is about how Harris kind of denounces organized religions. Organized in the sense that, like, don't follow cults. Here's what to look for in, like, enigmatic leaders. Don't follow leaders. Kind of follow yourself and what you know to be true. So this is, of course, good philosophy, but it takes away, in my opinion, from the overall impact of the book, because he kind of goes on, I wouldn't say a rant, but like a little ramble about this aspect of meditation and the things that can happen with meditations and kind of cults and people that you subscribe to and follow blindly. Not subscribe, that's like a YouTube kind of thing, but people that, like, gurus and spiritual teachers, and he talks about the bad things that spiritual teachers have done, you know, how they kind of control their subjects sometimes by us assigning, like, this reverence to a leader and following it blindly, where his kind of philosophy is, look internal for the results and approach it from a more logical, scientific, and don't kind of get emotional about these things. So it's good advice. It's like life advice, but it's maybe a little strays from the core message of the book, which is supposed to be all about waking up and how spirituality is important and how mindfulness is important. So that was like kind of the negatives with some of those ideas. And I think the other negative for me is that it's not really an actionable, like, takeaway book. So I think in The Untethered Soul and The Power of Now, both those kind of have the authors kind of sharing, okay, here's a technique to get more mindful. And in Harris's book, the one technique that stuck with me, and here now a couple days later, was the idea of no mind or no head, which was, honestly kind of a little bit mind-blowing when I was listening to that part, where it's kind of a thought experiment where you never actually see your own face. You're always looking out on the world. So you kind of imagine that there is no head to begin with, and that helps you kind of not attach like a container to your thoughts, because there is no mind, there's no head to contain them. So you're always just looking out. It's very trippy, and I'm probably totally butchering this, but the idea of like, what is self, self is an illusion created by the brain. That did stick with me, and it kind of still has me kind of think about this when I'm just like normally walking, that kind of being mindful that the self is just a construct of the brain. But again, the contrast is what I'm saying, why it's a little bit negative. The book is that, or not negative, but less impactful, was Untethered Soul and Power of Now kind of had more, here's practical examples of how to be more mindful or achieve a more mindful state, how to recognize thoughts. And it comes at it, from a more spiritual, mystical, new agey kind of way to look at self. But I found it more valuable because that allowed me to kind of grasp some of these concepts and ground them immediately. Like the examples, I think it was Power of Now, where Toll says, like, as you're washing dishes, kind of let your body feel the dishes and feel the water, and like I could relate to that, and I could see that as coming into practice. So that more kind of like that Toll is more of like a teacher, and the book is definitely structured like that. That Power of Now, if you haven't read it, it's Toll kind of giving advice and like a student asking for how to resolve some problem or some question, and then Toll giving what he would do. So I like that teacher-student kind of relationship, and I thought that's what made a lot of it click for me and made me resonate for longer. Whereas this book, Waking Up, kind of reinforces what you might already know about mindfulness. So if you're already kind of into mindfulness, this is a cool book for you, because it's going to kind of give you a different perspective on things you already know, or give you, again, a different way to look at mindfulness in general. But if you've never been exposed to mindfulness and the concept of that, it's not really like a beginner's book to mindfulness. This is more for the advanced reader, or someone who's actually, or who's already, not actually, but already read a few books on the subject and kind of is starting to form their own thoughts and ideas on self and mindfulness and consciousness. So that said, the book itself a good read for me. I found it very helpful, and it's kind of like my trilogy now of books. Untethered Soul, Power of Now, and I think Waking Up is a good kind of addition to your repertoire if you're into mindfulness. And if you have any other suggestions for me to check out, I'd love to hear them. I've read a couple of other different authors out there, but those are the kind of the three that stuck with me the most. And yeah, I thought they were interesting reads. It was Waking Up by Sam Harris. I'd probably give it maybe like a 3.5 out of 5 because, again, it's very specific for who this book's for. It's semi, I guess, structured for general masses because it has some of these other ideas at the end about how to identify bad gurus, and that chapter is really sticking out to me. But it's not really a how-to book, so it's not your first introduction to mindfulness. So do kind of seek out that elsewhere. Seek out The Power of Now or Untethered Soul, but definitely give this a listen if you want to delve more deep on the subject of self as an illusion and consciousness and meditation and the benefits of meditation. So thanks for watching this video on my thoughts and a mini review of Sam Harris's Waking Up. Have a great day.